Welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we are diving into a truly fascinating 15-year stretch in modern British history. Between 1961 and 1975, the entire landscape of the UK fundamentally shifted. We're going to explore exactly how women's rights moved from the realm of private individual campaigns straight into the heart of national law. It's an incredible story of medical breakthroughs, picket lines, and parliament, and we're going to break the whole shebang down step by step.
So, the big question framing our journey today is this. How did just 15 years completely transform the rights of women in modern Britain? When you really look closely at this era, it's basically a giant domino effect. One major historical event tips over into the next, steadily knocking down barriers across fertility, employment, and overall societal equality.
Okay, let's dive into this roadmap. We'll start with the contraceptive pill in 1961, then move on to the Abortion Act in 67, the Ford Strike in 68, the Equal Pay Act in 1970, and finally, the Sex Discrimination Act in 1975. This chronological journey is going to show us exactly how things built from private, bodily autonomy all the way to public workplace power.
Section 1, 1961, Taking Control of Fertility. So, what happened in 1961? Well, the contraceptive pill became available on the NHS. Now, initially, it was mostly prescribed just to married women, so it definitely didn't create widespread equality overnight. But here is why it was a real game changer. Before this, women had incredibly limited, reliable control over if or when they had children. The pill finally gave women much greater control over pregnancy and family planning. As access widened throughout the 60s and 70s, it gave women the freedom to delay having kids, to have smaller families, and crucially, it made it far more possible to actually stay in work and plan out their education and marriages.
Section 2, 1967, the Abortion Act. Introduced by Liberal MP David Steele, the 1967 Abortion Act actually came into force in 1968, applying to England, Wales, and Scotland. It allowed for abortion under specific medical conditions as long as it was approved by 2 doctors. So why did this matter so much? Well, before this act, women seeking to end a pregnancy often had to turn to illegal, wildly dangerous backstreet abortions, which were tragically sometimes fatal. This legislation finally provided a vital legal safety net. Now, while it wasn't total reproductive freedom, because doctors obviously still held that final approval, it was still a monumental shift in women gaining safer, legal access to healthcare and ultimately control over their own family lives. Okay, so women are clearly gaining unprecedented control in their private and medical lives. But what happens when this growing demand for autonomy and equality leaves the doctor's office and confidently strides right onto the factory floor?
Section 3, 1968, the Dagenham Ford Strike. Now, what's really interesting about this is the number 187. Just about 187 women, sewing machinists, walked out. In a massive industrial complex, that sounds like a tiny, almost insignificant fraction of the workforce, right? But this small group of women completely stopped car production. Why? Because without the seat covers they were making, the finished cars simply couldn't be completed. They proved without a shadow of a doubt that their labor was absolutely essential to British industry. The core unfairness that sparked this incredible walkout was just profound. These women were doing highly skilled work, making these car seat covers, but their work had been deliberately graded as unskilled, which literally meant they were being paid less than the male workers. Their essential labor was totally undervalued. This blatant unfairness really struck a nerve, gaining immense national attention and actually leading to a direct, face-to-face meeting with Barbara Castle, who was the Labour government's Secretary of State for Employment and Productivity. And the immediate result of that courage? 92%. The women won a pay rise, bringing them to 92% of the male rate. Now, sure, they didn't immediately win full regrading as skilled workers, but this victory mattered deeply. It proved that women workers could effectively organize, they could halt major production, and they could literally embarrass employers and the government into taking real action.
Section 4, 1970, the Equal Pay Act. Strongly associated with Barbara Castle, the 1970 Equal Pay Act aimed to make it completely illegal to pay women less than men for the exact same work, or even for work rated as equivalent. Why it mattered is huge. It took a nice principle and turned it into hard law. Pay was no longer just some quiet, private negotiation between a boss and a worker. It became a formalized issue of legal rights. Now, to be fair, this landmark moment definitely had its limitations. It didn't come fully into force until 1975 to give employers a buffer to adjust, and practically speaking, proving that two totally different jobs were of equal value could be exceptionally difficult. But the line in the sand had been drawn.
Section 5, 1975, enshrining equality in law. Parliament passed the Sex Discrimination Act, and honestly, its scope was massive. It covered employment, education, training, and the provision of goods and services. It made it definitively illegal to discriminate against men or women based on their sex or marital status across all these essential areas of daily life. For instance, employers could no longer openly reject women simply because they were women, or because they were married, or because they might have kids one day. It challenged discrimination everywhere, from job adverts to someone just trying to get a promotion.
But a law is really only as good as its enforcement. That exact same year, the Equal Opportunities Commission was created. This body was specifically formed to actively help enforce this sweeping new legislation and actually promote equality in everyday life. And this brilliantly illustrates the evolution we've been tracking. Back in 1970, we see a very targeted goal: equal pay for equivalent work under Barbara Castle, which, as we noted, was kind of limited by the sheer difficulty of proving equal value. Fast forward to 1975, with a new act and commission, and the goal widened to broad systemic protection across society. The struggle successfully expanded from just a targeted fight on the factory floor to combating discrimination in education, training, and the broader public square. Section 6, a transformed legal landscape. This quote perfectly summarizes the era. Women's rights were increasingly recognized in law, politics, medicine, and the workplace. Now, it's absolutely crucial to state that these 5 major events did not magically end sexism or erase inequality overnight, but they represent a massive, undeniable pattern of change. They dragged the fight out of the shadows and firmly planted it right into the statutes of modern Britain, fundamentally changing the rules of the game for generations to come. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. If just 15 years, from 1961 to 1975, could completely rewrite the legal foundations of modern Britain regarding autonomy and equality, what boundaries are we reshaping today? Because history isn't just something that happened back then. It's a living process we are all part of right now. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.